anxiety, and anxiety levels have skyrocketed. Their extraordinary usefulness gives them an unprecedented hold on our attention and a vast influence over our thinking and behavior. What happens to our minds when we allow a single tool such dominion over our perception and cognition? Studies show as the brain grows dependent on technology, what weakens? The intellect actually weakens. Using a smartphone or even hearing one ring or vibrate produces distractions that makes it harder to concentrate on a difficult problem or job. And the division of attention impedes reasoning and performance. And that's one of the areas that Dr. Ward and others focus in on, is the fact that this thing is able to grab our attention in otherwise where we would be problem solving or doing more useful things. When people's phones beep or buzz while they're in the middle of a challenging task, their focus wavers, their work gets sloppier, whether they check the phone or not. But interestingly, they don't recognize that their work is getting sloppier. They don't recognize that their focus is actually even wavering. When people hear their phone ring but are unable to answer it, their blood pressure actually spikes. Their pulse quickens and their problem-solving skills decline. This is the area of the brain called the frontal lobe. 520 undergraduate students at University of California, San Diego were given 2 standard tests of intellectual acuity. One test gauged available cognitive capacity, which is a measure of how fully a person's mind can focus on a particular task. The second assessed fluid intelligence. Sometimes we call fluid intelligence IQ. It's a person's ability to interpret and solve an unfamiliar problem. The only variable in the experiment was the location of the subject's smartphones. Some of the students were asked to place their phones in front of them on their desks. Others were told to stow their phones in their pockets or handbags. Still others were required to leave their phones in a different room altogether. The results were striking. In both tests, subjects whose phones were in view posted the worst scores. Those who left their phones in a different room did the best, and those who kept their phones in their pockets or bags came out in the middle. The study's authors stated this: as the phone's proximity increased, brain power decreased. In subsequent interviews, however, nearly all the participants said that their phones had not been a distraction, that they hadn't even thought about the devices during the experiment, so they couldn't have been affected by it. They remained oblivious even as the phones obviously disrupted their focus and thinking and produced dramatic difference in these scores. A second experiment conducted by the researchers produced similar results while also revealing that the more heavily students relied on their phones in their everyday lives, the greater the cognitive penalty they suffered. In other words, it actually did affect their IQ, their ability for their frontal lobe to work. Our attachment to our phones has grown so intense that their mere presence diminishes intelligence, according to those who are researching it out. By the way, we shouldn't be surprised at this when the inventor of the smartphone restricted his own children in the use of it. Dr. Ward and his colleagues wrote that the integration of smartphones into daily life appears to cause a brain drain that can diminish such vital mental skills as learning, logical reasoning, abstract thought, problem solving, and what else? Creativity. Can you imagine if a drug was introduced in the market? Maybe this drug was to possibly help anxiety, for instance. And the drug might have actually shown benefit that it helped anxiety. But after it was introduced, because side effects weren't looked at, we found out that the drug decreased learning, logical reasoning, abstract thought, problem solving, and creativity. What would we say about that drug maker? That drug maker is greedy. They didn't even look for those things. They didn't look for those complications. And now this drug is being used by kids everywhere for anxiety, and it's causing them to fail in school. It's causing them to not even want to be successful in school. It's causing them to not even have respect for their parents and those sorts of things. And we would rightly blame that drug company for being so greedy and not looking at that. We'd also probably blame the FDA because the FDA didn't, allowed them to release this drug with all of those problems. But this is what happened to the smartphone. The smartphone is released. We only were looking at the benefits of using a smartphone, but nobody was looking at the complications or risks of using the smartphone. And now that it's been released, we realize that the normal use of a smartphone, now I'm going to talk about a very different use of a smartphone eventually, but this requires some diligent effort, and it requires some planning in advance and those sorts of things. But the normal use of a smartphone has been shown to do all of those adverse things. It's going to decrease your ability to learn. It's going to decrease your logical reasoning. It's going to decrease your ability to think abstractly. It's going to decrease problem solving, and it's also going to decrease your creativity. That means your wealth, your future, even financial benefit, you'll suffer significant financial depression in your own family, in your own life, not even realizing that it's due to the fact that you're normally using a smartphone, and not even being aware of how much better you would be in life without it. People who had their phones in view, albeit turned off, during 2 demanding tests of attention and cognition made significantly more errors than did a control group whose phones remained out of sight. The 2 groups performed about the same on a set of easier tests. Researchers examined how smartphones affected learning in a lecture class with 160 students at the University of Arkansas at Monticello. They found that students who didn't bring their phones to the classroom scored a full letter grade higher on a test of the material presented than those who brought their phones. That's significant, a full GPA point. It didn't matter whether the students who had their phones used them or not. Even if they brought them and had them off and didn't use them, they all scored equally poorly. A study of 91 secondary schools in the UK, published in the journal Labour Economics, found that when schools ban smartphones, students' examination scores go up substantially, with the weakest students benefiting the most. By the way, Weimar Institute, I'll just give you a secret, we haven't rolled it out yet, but the board just voted, based on the recommendation of our accrediting body, that Weimar Institute change its name, and the board agreed to change it. But Weimar Institute is soon to be Weimar University. We have an exceptional higher education institution there. It is actually, you're more likely to be published in a peer-reviewed journal as a student coming to Weimar than any other educational institution per capita. And it's also got top programs in nursing, both associates as well as bachelor's degree, and pre-med programs, natural science, business. We had actually the head of our business, I don't know if he's still here, the head of our business program was here earlier today. And of course, a lot of other programs, education, theology, psychology. And we also have several master's programs. Now we're a graduate level institution with our first accredited master's program in counseling psychology. Because of all the psychological problems we have, we have a problem in our society today, and we have most of the people that believe that are trained to be licensed counselors actually have an aversion to the truths of the Bible. Do you realize that? Most licensed psychologists actually are at war with the principles of the Bible, in large part due to the fact of how they're trained. And Weimar, as I mentioned this morning, is uncompromisingly scientific, but unapologetically biblical. And these two go hand in hand. If we want the best science, we have to be biblical, because that's where the truth is at. And so that's one of the reasons why we've started this counseling psychology program. By the way, we weren't sure, since we're so unapologetically biblical, if we would be approved by our accreditor in regards to starting this program, but we were approved by both the accreditor as well as the Board of Behavioral Sciences in California, meaning that all of our students will meet the requirement for licensure upon completion of their master's. And this is, of course, a good news. So right now, the Bible is not banned officially as being something that is where you can't get your license degree from. But we could go into some of the reasons why that is, and our culture is very much pushing against biblical principles in their attempts at making people psychologically better. But it's not religion. Of course, false religion can have its problems, but true religion never goes against the principles of psychological wellness. It actually helps the principles of psychological wellness. But our accreditor, back to our accreditor, this is how I started thinking about this. Our accreditor for Stanford and all of the higher league colleges, of which Weimar is one, in California, our accreditor is based in the Bay Area. And it's interesting that the very place in which it's based on, their high schools in that area have banned smartphones. You can't go to the high school with a smartphone. You actually put it in a pocket. You might get it when you leave. But and a few years ago, educators were saying, we need to have students have more of these devices. We need to have every student have a device. We need to have them connected. But now when they're doing the studies, they're saying, we need to take these devices away. If we really want them to be able to think for themselves, if we want them to be able to problem solve. And by the way, that's another thing Weimar was shown in our process of getting accreditation. Our students were found to be number one, and we don't know if they were actually number one, but they were above the 99 percentile, and I know what that usually means. It usually means you are number one. But they were above the 99 percentile in being able to solve real-world complex problems graduating from Weimar. And so a lot of people think, hey, if they're learning Bible, they're going to be in some la-la land and not being able to get down to where people are at and solve real-world complex problems. No, we showed the exact opposite. When you have Bible and science together, and those go together, you're actually going to be able to meet the needs of more people, and you're going to be able to be far more successful in being able to solve their real-world complex problems. But high schools are paying attention now because our accrediting city there in the Bay Area is banning smartphones in their high schools. But using devices normally significantly reduces your brain's capacity to process information. According to a study from the University of London, multitasking actually reduces your IQ, with multitasking men dropping an average of 15 points, effectively giving them the same cognitive capabilities as an 8-year-old child. When your IQ drops that much, you actually become very immature in your thinking. And sometimes we wonder why adult men and women act like they're 8-year-olds. Well, this can certainly be one of the reasons right there. Researchers at the University of Sussex in the UK compared the amount of time people spent on multiple devices, such as texting while watching TV, to MRI scans of their brains. They found that these device users had less brain density in the anterior cingulate cortex. Anterior means the front part of the brain. And the cingulate cortex is a section of the frontal lobe, a region responsible for empathy as well as cognitive and emotional control. So the more you're using these devices normally, the more this area of your frontal lobe shrinks. In a study conducted at the University of Essex in the UK, 142 participants were divided into pairs and asked to converse in private for 10 minutes. Half talked with a phone in their room, while half had no phone present. The subjects were then given tests of affinity, trust, and empathy. The mere presence of mobile phones inhibited the development of interpersonal closeness and trust, diminished the extent to which individuals felt empathy and understanding from their partners, and the downsides were strongest when a personally meaningful topic was being discussed. So in other words, these are getting into the way of good social relations and actually good friends. In our depression and anxiety recovery program, I hesitate to say this publicly because I know some people might freak out who really need our program when I'll say this. But this is part of what I'm giving you today is the first lecture they get when they come to the program. Because guess what we're getting ready to do? We're getting ready to take away their phones and their computers for the 10 days that they're there. Why are we doing that? Because we know that they're going to miss out on a lot of important things if they have a device distracting them during a lecture. And they'll also miss out if their counselor is having a device in the middle of a counseling session and has to be distracted from that. They're going to not have the development of interpersonal closeness and trust. And of course, if they have a device, it's not going to be that way as well. And a lot of these people, particularly the younger generation, they will tell me, I'd rather not eat for 10 days than you take my phone away for 10 days. And they say, this is how I help my anxiety. I have anxiety. I need to watch a YouTube video at times to distract myself from my anxiety. And so how am I going to be able to do this? And of course, these people all get better during the 10 days, and we have to remind them as their phones are being handed back to them, now with an intelligent use of them, hopefully. But as they're being handed back, you got better. Look at your scores. Look at how much better you're doing. Your panic attacks are gone. Your anxiety is gone. Your depression is gone. And it all happened without a phone. And also, they become very close to other people in the program. They will stay up with these people for life because they spent 10 days without a phone, and those people also didn't have a phone during those 10 days. And they become, this is the way friendships used to be. And it's hard, it's hard to have friendships like that today. These kids think they have friendships. They're very shallow, superficial friendships. There's not that depth of interpersonal closeness and trust in being able to discuss meaningful topics. The average individual that comes to our program, we'll ask them because social parts of anxiety and depression are very prominent. And we'll ask them sometimes, who is your number one social support? They have a hard time being able to answer that. They'll be able to answer some friends. Do your friends know what you're going through? Do they know that you're struggling? No. I'm not going to tell them that. And so they really don't have anybody, and they're not going to tell their parents everything either. They're not transparent with them. And this, of course, is not healthy. They need to be able to develop good, trusted friends that have that ability for interpersonal closeness and trust, and a good enough friend for that friend to be able to rebuke them without them being able to, defriend them as a result of that. Rebuke a wise man, and he'll love thee. Rebuke a fool, and he'll hate thee. And so a lot of these individuals, they can't stand the little bit of condemnation or criticism for their own benefit, and they're defriending people and all of this sort of thing going on, which wasn't really the case prior to these phones. Well, what about memory? We talked about the frontal lobe. Memory is not in the frontal lobe. There's a portion of the memory, our working memory, that can be part of the frontal lobe, but where memory is stored is actually the temporal lobe behind the ear. People's knowledge and understanding may actually dwindle as gadgets grant them easier access to online data stores. Memory experts had a group of volunteers read 40 brief factual statements. Half the people were told that the machine would save what they typed. Half were told that the statements would be immediately erased. So they're trying to remember these 40 statements by typing them in. By the way, there was another study prior to this that was done. Which do you think are you able to remember things better, when you're typing something in or when you're writing it down? When you're writing it down. Yes, there's a three-dimensional activity, so writing is far better to be able to get it in the permanent memory. But by the way, writing classes are almost eliminated in schools today. Elementary schools aren't even having writing classes at all because they think all the kids need to do is type, which is more of it's not that 3D writing activity that is more practical and useful. But nonetheless, both groups were typing in what they were learning. But one of the groups was told that even though you're typing it in to help you learn it, it's going to be immediately erased. So you're not going to refer back to it. The other group wasn't told that. Afterward, the researchers asked the subjects to write down as many of the statements as they could remember. Those who believed that the facts had been recorded in the computer demonstrated much weaker recall than those who assumed the facts would not be stored. Anticipating that information would be readily available in digital form seemed to reduce the mental effort that people made to remember it. The researchers dubbed this phenomena the Google effect. Because search engines are continually available to us, we may often be in a state of not feeling we need to encode the information internally. When we need it, we think we'll look it up, so we don't actually remember it. But here's the problem. The art of remembering is actually the art of thinking. And one of the things about memory that's very important to recognize is it's actually easier to remember two things than it is one thing. The reason why is because when we're learning two things, we can associate them. Let me give you an example. In our natural science program, we have an amazing chemistry professor, well recognized by the world in regards to her chemical achievements. She actually worked at a pharmaceutical company before coming to Weimar and was one of the top scientists there. But she's one of the few chemists that I know anywhere that teaches at the college level general chemistry, organic chemistry, and biochemistry, and is an expert in all of those areas, and an exceptional teacher. In fact, our students, when they take an IQ test based on chemistry, which is called the MCAT, or the DAT, some of our students won't miss a single question. They'll get every one of those chemistry questions right, and it's one of the reasons why Weimar students have very high admissions to dental school and medical school and all that. Why are they so good at it? Well, because when she teaches them a chemical concept, she'll teach a biblical concept right along with it that goes along with the chemical concept. And so when you're taking an MCAT, remember an IQ test is being able to solve an unfamiliar problem. And so the makers of these tests realize we can't give them problems we've given them before. We need to have this be a brand new problem, a brand new area. So they'll show them this brand new problem. And the average person looking at that problem will say, I have no idea how to solve this. I've never seen this problem before. And our students will have that same thought when they see it. I've learned lots of chemistry, but I've never seen this problem before. Then they'll tell me, as they look at it, they'll remember the biblical theological concept first. Then they'll remember the chemical concept, and then they'll solve the problem. Why? Because the art of remembering is the art of what? It's the art of thinking. And here's the issue when we're not able to remember things. You know, when I was growing up, I probably had 1,000 phone numbers memorized. You know, you could tell, if someone would call me up, what is your uncle's phone number? Boom, you could spit it out, you know, all 10 digits. When I was working at the hospital, you know, you knew exactly what the pharmacy number was. You knew what this nurse's station was and that nurse's station. All of these numbers were completely memorized. It's something that everybody really had to do. But now hardly anybody memorizes their number. And sometimes they don't even know their own phone number. Well, let me look it up here. And, my very closest sister, well, let's see. I can share you her contact information, but I can't tell you her phone number. And that's, we're not into that remembering aspect of things. But only by encoding information in our biological memory can we weave the rich intellectual associations that form the essence of personal knowledge and give rise to critical and conceptual thinking. No matter how much information swirls around us, the less well-stocked our memory, the less we have to think with. And when people call up information through their devices, they often end up suffering from what's called delusions of intelligence. The advent of the information age seems to have created a generation of people who feel they know more than ever before, the scholars concluded, even though they may know even less about the world around them. In fact, most of these people know less about the world around them, and that's why they're also very gullible when they're given information. And because they don't have facts well stored that they know are absolute truths, when something comes across them that doesn't fit that absolute truth model, they don't even question it, because they're not used to having their memories stocked with things that are true. And so they have less things to be able to analyze and think through things. And this is why our society has become so gullible. Sometimes people look at politics and wonder, how in the world can so many people get deceived by these group of politicians? Well, this is the setup for it. So monitoring the future, longitudinal study, a major survey looking at the lives of more than 1 million young people. Teens who spend large amounts of time glued to their phones and computer screens are markedly less happy than those who prefer real-world activities and interactions. Using social media, texting, video chatting, multi-platform video games, all associated with what? Less happiness, not more happiness. We think our kids need these devices so they can be happy. We don't realize we are zapping their happiness away from them because of what we're actually doing to their dopamine receptors, which I will get to. Youth who invested more time in non-screen activities, playing sports, reading actual books or newspapers, face-to-face social interaction versus just online interaction, which we are starving our kids from as a result of what I talked about this morning. All significantly happier individuals. Life satisfaction, self-worth, happiness of young people in the U.S. particularly began to plummet after 2012, the year when the proportion of Americans owning a smartphone rose by above 50%. By the way, that's a very important data point. It's happened in every country since that time. I was in Kenya in 2019. And Kenya's in Africa, very sunny country. Kenyans overall are very happy people, very busy people. But when I got there to speak, the headline of the newspaper, and it wasn't timed with my arrival there, although I was coming to speak about the brain, the headline of the newspaper was, "Shock, depression rates, suicide rates skyrocket in Kenya." The next headline of the next day is, "Shock, depression and suicide risks related to smartphone usage." And they talked about how a year before, over 50% of Kenyans now owned a smartphone. And so once again, once you see this smartphone becoming universal, you are going to see complications of it in regards to IQ going down, EQ going down. You're going to see also mental illness going up, life satisfaction and self-worth going down. The happiest teenagers are those who use digital media less than how much? 1 hour per day. And that doesn't mean they're using it for entertainment, but they might be using it more intelligently, but using it in any form less than an hour a day. That is the happiest group of young people. After a daily hour of screen time, levels of unhappiness rise steadily and exponentially. So the key to digital media use and happiness is limited use and intelligent use. And so the lead author says, try to increase the time you spend seeing friends face-to-face, physically exercise. These are two activities reliably linked to greater happiness. And then another big issue is digital dementia. We are seeing mental academic challenges such as we have never seen before in people that would otherwise be intelligent and smart due to digital dementia. High-speed media content contributes to attention deficit as well as decreased concentration and memory due to the brain pruning neuronal tracts to the frontal cortex. Children who can't pay attention can't learn. And when they're using devices normally, they are going to be continually used to being distracted. And then addiction is another major issue. Parents also can get addicted. As parents attach more and more to technology, they are detaching from their children. In the absence of parental attachment, detached children can attach to devices, which can result in addiction. 1 in 11 children age 8 to 18 were addicted to technology before 2009, and now it is far higher than that today. And I can tell you a lot of it is the parental influence. I can tell you about some sad cases, one that we had in a program not long ago. This was a daughter who was 15, I believe, 15 years old, severe depression, severe anxiety, had self wounds all over herself from cutting. In the interview, no spiritual bearing except for the fact that she didn't want to be Christian and she didn't want to be Seventh-day Adventist. Her parents were actually missionaries, not from America, but from another country to another place that was not America as well. But fortunately, when she was that young, the mother had to come with her. You could see very strained relationship between mother and daughter. Daughter didn't really want to have anything to do with mother whatsoever. And mother did not feel like she could take her phone away from her or her devices or anything because her daughter would get really upset at her. By the way, that's another thing. This is even more common. You know, I work in hospitals and intensive care units 2 or 3 days a week just to keep my ICU skills up. And we've had to admit people because their parents took their phone away from them while they were going down the highway, and the kid tries to jump out of a moving car to end their life because their phone is being taken away from them. These things are not unusual, and it is the grip and addiction that people have to their phones and devices are pretty amazing. And this girl had one of those grips and addictions to using her phone. And as we got into it more of counseling of mother and daughter, we found out that the husband was the one who was busy and doing a lot of things. The wife wasn't too happy to be in that area, and so she would spend a lot of time on her devices as her daughter was being born and grew up. And so, and she wasn't too necessarily excited to be having a daughter around that time. It happened, and so she was trying to raise the daughter, but primarily, she herself was addicted to her phone. And when parents attach to their technology, they detach from their children, and their children attach tenfold more to the technology than what the parent was attached to. And so you start seeing this pass along in generations, and of course it required some superhuman efforts on our part. We did get the device away from the girl. The girl wasn't going to stay. I didn't know my device was going to need to be taken away. Well, we had told her that. But finally, as a result of counseling, the girl gave up the phone, but the mother was not giving up the phone. And so it was actually the daughter coming to mom. Mom, you need to give up your phone too. I gave up mine. And so both of them, of course, ended up with no phone. And then they had to start relating to each other, staying in the same room. And that required a lot of work and counseling on our part to be able to open the way for that to happen. But it's pretty complicated. And normally people like that, they have to be without their phones for at least any device or screen for at least 6 weeks. Because if you train them in 10 days how to use it intelligently, they're so hooked on using it the normal way that they're not going to use it intelligently when they get back. It's like giving a glass of alcohol back to an alcoholic after having them dry for 10 days. That's not enough time for them to be able to handle that. And so it requires some significant efforts. Of course, all of this is concerning. Highest rates of mental illness ever in America, lowest scores in emotional intelligence, but yet the younger generation thinks they're the most informed. They also have the greatest pride in their own abilities, but they are the least informed, evidence shows, and also the most gullible. But we cannot give them up as doomed. There's a child psychiatrist by the name of Victoria Dunkley. She's written a book called Reset Your Child's Brain, but it's also a good book for adults as well. The first half of the book, she goes through a lot of evidence that we presented, plus a lot more, to show that the normal use of devices are going to cause mental illness. In fact, she even states that she won't even diagnose mental illness in anybody until they've given up their devices for 6 weeks, because often their brain problems will completely normalize after 6 weeks of no devices whatsoever. The last half of the book is to show you how you can live life without devices and how you can go to college. A lot of people say, hey, I can't go to school because I have to do my assignments online. No, we can have a doctor write a disability prescription saying this person cannot utilize devices. They have to utilize it other ways. And with the Americans for Disabilities Act, those teachers have to comply with those disability statements. And they have to find alternative ways for them to be able to do their homework and for them to be able to do things during particularly these 6 weeks. So I'm going to skip through a little bit of this. By the way, people are talking about a digital Sabbath is important every day. That means significant amount of time where you are not around your devices at all, and you don't even have them available to you. That's an important aspect of living a life that is successful. And of course, people wonder, is it worth making a change? Actually, the more nervous you are about making the change, the more important it is that you make the change. And these are all the benefits: mood happier, emotionally stable, less irritable, better focused, more organized, less impulsive, more compliant, better rested, more physically active. And of course, your money will be saved, less medicine use, less household problems. And long-term benefits: optimize your academic career or creative potential. One of our speakers at our EQ Summit, and by the way, all of you are invited to Weimar Institute in February. I think it's February 18 through 21. You might look at the dates, I might have them a little bit wrong. But that's when we hold our annual Emotional Intelligence Summit. And we always get great speakers from all over the world. But one of the speakers, Cal Newport, he is, by the way, a very successful late 20s computer programmer who makes in excess of $1 million a year programming. How did he get so good? He did not use devices. And you'd say, a computer programmer that didn't use devices? What do you mean? Nope, he never had a social media account. And he tells this story. He actually kind of fell into it a little bit fortuitously because he was upset at the social media companies and the people that were running them, that he didn't want to give them any advantages whatsoever. So he decided he wasn't going to sign up at all for social media. People said, if you're a computer programmer, how are people going to learn about you? And he says, if you're very good at something, they will find you. And indeed, they do find him in other ways because he's very good at what he does. But he's written several books, and now he's making a lot of money on his books and speaking appointments. One of the books is called Digital Minimalism. And it tells you that if you get caught in an app or a device where you have wasted your time, you need to get rid of that app and device. You only need to be on things that are going to be useful and helpful, but you don't get caught in, and you don't start wasting time in. And so he's very efficient with his time. He refuses to work over 40 hours a week. He has a great extra life that is not work, that's related to family and his young kids now, and also related to other hobbies that he's doing. And he has plenty of time, a very happy individual. But he said, my happiness and success is very much related to digital minimalism. Do not use devices normally, or you are going to be destroying your potential in the future. By the way, I'm very grateful that I was raised in a society where I didn't have those temptations growing up. I do feel for our younger generation that has gotten hooked on these things, where I didn't have the opportunity to have a smartphone growing up. I'm very glad that I didn't have that opportunity because I know my level of success could have been threatened if I got involved in that trap. But essentially, when you're involved in just following what people are doing on YouTube, you're basically living their life and not yours. And, life is short. You need to be living your own life and not just staring at what others have done after their 10,000 YouTube films to finally get one YouTube film that attracts 1 million viewers to it to get you sucked into that sort of thing. And instead, you need to be actually optimizing your own academic career and creative potential. Also, long-term benefits without these devices: more responsible, more empathetic, better relationship partner. Even brain chemistry improves, cortisol levels improve, dopamine levels improve, and you can go places without risking meltdowns. So I would recommend, if you have or you think you might have an addictive relationship, try an eFast. We mentioned 6 weeks. Implement it, count the time, and then reevaluate. And then what should you do instead of a smartphone? There's something called a dumb phone. Dumb phones still work. And you can actually also have a flip phone. You can also have, a lot of people in our program buy Gab phones. Gab phones are particularly, they still have a calendar. You can text. You can't text any pictures. So no Snapchat, those type of things. But you can text, you can call, you can have a calendar, an alarm, a calculator. It looks just like an iPhone. So if you're in 10th grade in school, you look as cool as the other guy that has the iPhone. But it's actually better. And I can tell you, the people that have gone through our program, our teenagers, they love their Gab phones. They mention how much better it is for them and how much more they're succeeding in school without it, and how they're able to be focused and those sorts of things because they don't have those constant distractions that are there. And then I've just, talked about a little bit of the tip of the iceberg, but the other issue involved in it, and if we had time, we'd go into it. Well, maybe I'll mention this. Let's go to for those in the media department, let's go to the next presentation. I'll tell you what slide number it is. We'll skip through a lot of this because I don't want to keep you too late today, and where you can still get some fresh air and vitamin D today. And this is another issue with our young people and what can happen to them. This was a woman who did a study. She spent 1 week online as an 11-year-old. Now, she's actually an adult. This is her body. But she put an 11-year-old face on this body, and she posted it online. 52 teens and men responded within a few days. 15 of those responses were within 2 hours. Hi, I was just wondering how long you've been a model for. If not, you should be a model. You're so pretty. You are a very beautiful girl. I love your pictures on here. Does your mom and dad let you have a boyfriend yet? And she posted her age, 11 years old. Since we are together, I mean, this is just online. Since we are together, are you ready to send sexy pictures to each other? This is all within 2 days. By letting your child or teenager have a smartphone or a computer, you're exposing them to interact with the creeps of the world. And I can tell you, the creeps of the world are out there. They know all the phrases that might be searched. If someone is struggling for same-sex attractions or something, they plug that in, and they will tell that individual all sorts of things that are not true and deceptive, and put them into a box, and put them into places and that will ruin them in many ways for the rest of their life and affect their thinking. Why? Because we have exposed them to the creeps of the world. They don't have a frontal lobe yet. They don't have a memory that's stocked with facts and things that are true that are not true. And so we wonder why someone like I just mentioned, 15-year-old, I didn't tell you all about her, but she said that she was lesbian, all of these sorts of things that she came out with. She did all of these things that are based on the internet, those sorts of things. This girl was not a lesbian girl, but she was convinced by the creeps of the internet that she was. And of course, if you're convinced that you're something that you're not, and all of those things that must follow, there's going to be all sorts of division that takes place in regards to all of this. So these are all things that we're having to unravel in our depression and anxiety recovery program, but thank the Lord, any brain can change for the better. And this girl did change. Now, she did have to spend more than 10 days. At the 10-day point, she wasn't quite ready. Neither was the mother ready to even handle her. In fact, we knew the night before when they were given their phones back, and the mother now felt like she needed to be a mother and take the phone away from the daughter that wasn't using it rightly. The daughter actually punched out the mother the night before they're supposed to go home. And we heard the commotion and came in and had to divide them. The mother was scared to death. It's a pretty big 15-year-old girl that was punching her out because she was taking away her phone. They weren't ready for home. But I can tell you, the Lord has worked on their life. The one has become willing to be a mother. Of course, the 15-year-old daughter isn't quite ready to let her be a mother because of all the things that have happened beforehand, but that 15-year-old is a result of being introduced to our staff, loves our staff, recognizes our staff are very loving, that we have it together, that we can help her and do all of these things, and she is indeed benefiting from that. And now she identifies herself as a believer in God, a believer in the Bible. In fact, she loves her devotions every morning as she's learning factual truths, and she is turning around. Yes, it's only been a few weeks, so it hasn't gone through the 20 weeks yet. It takes 20 weeks for that brain to change, but any brain can change for the better, and that's the good news. This is why we never should leave someone as being doomed, or because they're hooked to their devices that they'll never get better. There is hope for everybody, and it's amazing what can happen when the person actually goes through the steps where the brain can start developing in very positive ways. So I did mention that I'll open it up for questions and answers. I know I've been going for about an hour, maybe a little less than an hour, and I want you to be able to have time away from here today too. So I don't know if we have any roving microphones, but maybe we'll take a few questions. Either about this topic, it could be about depression and anxiety, or it could be about the topic this morning. You might have had some questions about COVID and New Start. We'll be willing to handle any of those. All right, I think Pastor Sager, okay, you have a question, and maybe, I don't know, should we have it on microphone, Pastor, or... Okay, we're going to have our first question right here. Maybe they can get you a microphone. Okay, they're going to pass the microphones out. So, okay, these are the two that are passing the microphones. There's a gentleman up here that would like to have a microphone and ask a question. Right up here. Raise your hand, the one who wants to ask a question. All right, and then if there's anyone else, we can have another microphone ready for you so we don't have to wait for the next question. Whoever would like to ask question number 2, I think that gentleman right here has question number 2. Oh, I'm sorry, there's going to be question number 2 back there and question number 1 up here. Up to the very front, very front on this side. Thank you very much. Yes, go ahead.
My question is based on 2 things about this argument about cell phones. First of all, the cell phones were supposed to be advanced for the useful purpose of communication, right? But my question is, our federal government supposed to, don't we have a law that's supposed to step in and regulate this company that makes software to put these phones, what they can put into minors' phones and what not? Because we are Christian country, values country, so we have to have a government that regulate those Satan tools to our society. I'm wondering, the leaders of this country are so corrupt and let this technological company, like what Mr. Trump is saying, this is exactly what they're doing to our people in our country. So what's going on with our culture and this technology firm that try to make money to exploit our society in a wrongful way? That's not what the phone meant to be. I'm wondering.
No, that's a great question, and it gets into the political arena and the role of government. I can tell you there's one senator that does understand this. In fact, we invited him to speak at our EQ summit, and he knows all the information that I've presented, and he wants to protect his constituents and society in the United States from the problems that I've just mentioned. And he has introduced bills to help solve the situation, and he will not get a second sponsor. So at this point in time, there's 1 out of the 100 senators that are willing to move ahead and actually enforce these companies. You know, right now, they're kind of policing themselves. And, you know, they're aware about some of this. Some of this has gotten out. And for instance, the iPhone. You know, now you can have actually a little thing on it to say how much time you've spent on it and how much time you've spent on it. And you can actually program your iPhone that after X number of hours, it will come up and say, do you know that you have spent 8 hours on your device today? And you had agreed that your device would shut off after 8 hours. Press yes if you want this to happen. Press no if you would like to go further. Well, that's how they police themselves. And so it looks like they're being responsible, but they're not being responsible. And you can easily override that. And so, yes, I do think it would be helpful, just like it would be helpful for us to limit access to substances that are addictive. And by the way, we're making a mistake in this country in regards to freely allowing substances that have a hook and are addictive to be used by anybody who wants to use them recreationally. It's the same type of problem that we have here. But yes, I wish government would be more involved, but even though they're not involved, we can still police ourselves and police our own family and educate our own family and structure things accordingly so that we can set our own family up for much higher levels of success. Thank you. Okay, I think there was a question back here.
This is a depression-related question. I was wondering what your top recommendations are for people who undermethylate.
Top recommendation for people who
have trouble with undermethylation.
Okay, yes, undermethylation. That has to do with the biochemistry aspect of the brain. And it really depends upon the undermethylator. I'll just say in general, an undermethylator is going to need light therapy. They're going to need exercise. They're going to need more calcium. They're going to need more magnesium than the average individual. And if their homocysteine level is low and not a problem, they will need more S-adenosylmethionine. And for some individuals, we might actually recommend that they supplement with S-adenosylmethionine. Then we can measure their methylation ability in 6 weeks, and we can see whether we've corrected it or whether we may need to correct it some more. But undermethylators genetically are individuals that have a calm exterior but a tense interior. And they also have a tendency to have more obsessions, more OCD. They tend to not be the most social individuals outside their family. They can be good family members, but they don't really care about the social aspect beyond that very much. And there's other tendencies that go along with undermethylation. But the nice thing is, no matter what mutated gene we have, and yes, we look for all of those mutated genes when you come to the program, because when people come to our program for the therapeutic program, there is no stone that is left unturned. In other words, this is their last stop. They don't want to have to go anywhere else. They want to have it fixed in our program. And so we look at everything. And once we find that out, we will actually, it's called epigenetics, because genetics loads the gun, but it's lifestyle that pulls the trigger. And if we can change their nutrition and lifestyle, their undermethylation gene can go away. I mean, it's still there, but it's not active anymore. And so the brain can become a lot healthier as a result. But yeah, great question. Anyone else? Okay, you have the mic? Yeah, you've got it.
My main two uses of my phone are music and audiobooks. How negative is that?
Music and what else?
Books. Audiobooks.
Oh, audiobooks. Okay.
Many spare possible.
Yeah, so listening to audiobooks. Audiobooks are not a problem. Interestingly, even when we take a look at radio versus TV, what do you think is actually better for your frontal lobe? Radio is actually better because it involves some imagination, it involves thinking of the concepts that are being discussed, and those sorts of things. Where television can be very distracting by what's happening with the rapid scene of reference change and those sorts of things, which can also be frontal lobe suppressing. So audiobooks, you can be fine with audiobooks. And of course, scripture reading, spirit of prophecy books, I actually utilize myself when I go exercising in the morning. I will actually be listening to devotional material as I'm exercising. And of course, you can get a good couple of positive things going with that. Now, in regards to music, it depends on the type of music. The music that is melodic, that has a non-syncopated rhythm based on consonant harmonies, helps us imagine a scene, actually brings us to something more uplifting than ourself, something grander than ourselves. That's very healthy for the frontal lobe of the brain. And so music can be very beneficial for the brain. However, music that suppresses the frontal lobe, which this isn't a music seminar, but we could go into that. Music that suppresses the frontal lobe is actually more harmful to the brain than what healthy music is helpful for the brain. So it's not just listening to healthy music, it's actually avoiding the listening of the syncopated rock and roll rhythms that will actually produce some very positive effects in the brain by prohibiting that use of music. So yes, thank you. All right, is there someone else? I know the microphone has been on several areas. Yes, we have somebody here.
I think you may have partially answered that question, but is there really any difference between reading from a digital device versus reading from a book?
Okay.
Would there be any difference? It sounds like that other answer partially answered it.
Well, there actually is a difference, particularly if you're reading in the evening. And in fact, they actually did a crossover study. A number of subjects, they would actually have them read a book by Kindle or by another screen, but primarily a Kindle, a very unlit screen before going to bed, and then having them cross over and now read from printed books. And their melatonin levels actually were suppressed by over 40% by reading from a Kindle or a screen before going to bed. And that actually has to do with the interaction of the screen on the eyes and how it's suppressing the melatonin output. So the time for you to read printed material is actually in the evening. And stay away from the screens in the evening, particularly the hour before, although some studies are now showing it could have an influence up to 3 hours before. But yes, there may be some online things that we are needing to utilize. I can tell you in our program, this technology thing is so important. And people start to recognize what we're saying by the end of 10 days. They have a lot of skepticism after this first lecture, despite the convincing aspect of what you've just been through. For someone who's an addict it's not convincing enough for them. They might think, well, that's true for most people, but for me, I need it. I need my device. And so I'm different. And this is how every addict talks about themselves. Alcohol is bad for most people, but for me, you don't know me, I need it because I can't function without it. And so that's the way they'll think about these things. But we actually have them schedule someone with a technology expert, kind of like the digital minimalism guy, to actually go into their phones and delete the things that are actually going to be harming them on those phones. So if they don't buy a dumb phone and they still have their smartphone, they actually can no longer access the devices that have actually been causing a brain drain on them. And social media, here's the problem with social media, reading things off of social media. Many individuals utilize social media and they get hooked on it because they want to connect. But studies show that you don't connect for very long. You actually then begin to compare. And you know, there's a truth from the Bible that says comparing ourselves among ourselves is what? It's not wise, nor is it actually even accurate. And so the more you're on social media, the more unhappy you are with your life, in part due to the fact that people are posting on social media some very distorted things about themselves. They're only putting up what they want you to know about them. You know, not too long ago, before COVID came across, I was in New Zealand at one of the most beautiful places, Milford Sound, with these 5,000-foot cliffs. I was taking pictures. It was wonderful. I was getting a nice dopamine high. This is the healthy way to get your dopamine, all of this. But I was being threatened because of these two girls who were arguing almost to the point of blows at the front of this boat. But as soon as we got into the waterfalls, they smiled real big. They took out a picture, and they snapped it, and they uploaded it to their Instagram account and made everybody jealous. But as soon as they did that, they went back to arguing again. Now, nobody would have been jealous if they saw what was happening before the picture was taken and after the picture was taken. In fact, they'd say, "What in the world?" But instead, they think, "I'm slaving away at my job, and those two are having a great time down there." And they don't realize they're not having a great time at all. They're messed up girls. and that picture wasn't at all accurate in regards to what was going on in their life. And so that's the issue with social media. And so, yes, social media, if you're going to use it to actually tell people to come to a seminar that you're having at your church, go ahead and use it for that. But if you're going to be actually doing it as a form of social interaction, it's not a substitute for face-to-face social interaction. And it's far better to go face-to-face than it is to interact in that way. All right, right next to you, there's another question. And who has the next mic? Is there anyone else that has the next mic? Because we probably need to be winding down pretty well. There's a mic over there, too. Yes, go ahead.
I just wanted to know, what is it about reading a book in bed or reading a book just before you fall asleep? You fall asleep.
Well, it depends on what you want to do. If you're really wanting to learn about what's in that book, it's probably better for you not to read it in bed. But if you're wanting to use it as a sleep aid and something to just help calm you or whatever, some devotion, that sort of thing, it's okay to read it in bed. So, you know, either way is okay depending upon the effect. But if you're really wanting to learn it from an academic standpoint and being able to maybe pass a test on it later on, it's better not to be in bed.
But what causes you to fall asleep? Not even if you don't go to bed with the book.
Okay, yeah, why can you? Well, I didn't mention that, but you do fall asleep quicker. If you're on a screen, it will take you, before you go to bed, it'll normally take from 8 to 20 minutes longer before you get into a stage of sleep that's actually healthy, versus if you read a book that is, you know, a regular printed book. And so why is that? It's probably due to the melatonin effect that's going on. As soon as you turn out that light, your melatonin level is able to come up very nicely from that printed book. At least that's what the studies are showing.
Thank you.
All right, is there, I think there's a question back here, maybe? Yes, she's giving you the microphone, and then maybe one more, and then we'll wrap things up.
Thank you so much for your time and sharing this information with us. I think it's very enlightening. My question is, and I did see you wearing a mask earlier this morning before you start speaking. What is the negative effect of the mask breathing back your recycled carbon monoxide? And what do you recommend as a medical professional, seeing we're mandated to wear it now?
Okay. Yes, so, you know, masks, of course, are there to try to prevent the particulate material of the virus from going through and you contracting of that virus. But you're right, not too many people have talked about the downsides of using a mask. It's not carbon monoxide that's the downside, it's carbon dioxide. And carbon dioxide is rebreathing your own air because you produce carbon dioxide as far as your metabolism is concerned. And when you rebreathe that carbon dioxide, your blood becomes more acidic instead of basic. And particularly if you already have diseased lungs. So if you have chronic obstructive pulmonary disease or where you're already prone to have what's called CO2 narcosis, these would be individuals who would actually be best not to put anything in front of their face to inhibit the free exchange of air. However, for the average person, it doesn't really have that effect unless it is an N99 mask where it is so tight that you're having to use a lot of accessory muscles to breathe through all of that filtering system. And that could affect a normal person and start giving them some carbon dioxide overload. But the masks that you're seeing today that people are wearing, if they don't have, emphysema or chronic obstructive pulmonary disease or a condition where they're actively an asthmatic, it doesn't seem to have that type of negative effect. But yeah, great question. All right, and I think, was there one more?
Thank you again, sir. In some countries now are prohibiting the cell phones to person under 17 years old. So when they send to school, the parents tell the principal that there's a phone here, and if my kids need emergency, use this phone to call me, but they're not allowed to have phone. In some Pacific Island nations now. So it's a great, I want to share it because it's important because the kids under 17 are supposed to go to school and come back home and study and go to sleep. And now that we have this technology, we are made to work 6 days and 7 days we have to rest. So now this scientific technological thing that become embodied on human life is now we work more than what we're supposed to be now. Look like our brain is like overtime work every day. So just to share this, and the question is, do you have at least 5 or 6 most useful apps that every adult phone should have? Like for myself, my first apps is 2 Bible apps, New King James Version and the NIV version, and my bank and my dictionary, and the YouTube for gospel music, and so if you can share us at least the 10 fundamental basic apps that we can only useful that we can have, and other than that, we don't have to use other things.
No, that's a great question. In regards to your first comment, before I get to the question, this is one of the reasons why education is necessary. I teach a freshman class at Weimar Institute. Anyone that gets a bachelor's degree has to take this. It's part of the general ed requirements at Weimar. But it's called Optimize Your Brain, and it's how to improve their IQ and their EQ. So most of the freshman students are there so that they can be set up for success. It's one of the reasons why the Weimar students are able to solve real-world complex problems, because they have that as one of their first classes, and they learn all the principles of brain enhancement as well as to enhance their emotional intelligence. But the biggest problem we have in that class, because they have to go 3 weeks without a phone, and it's usually at the beginning, the biggest problem we have is not the kids giving up their phone for 3 weeks. Guess who it's from? It's from their parents. Wait a minute. What if something happens to you? How am I going to find out about it if you don't have a phone? There's some times when I may need to call you and you're not going to be available. So, we tell them what the dean's number is and what their dorm number is and how other ways and how we will be able to still, under emergencies, be able to do all of this. But we forgot how the world ran prior to 2007. And in reality, because we're so insistent on them having their device by them all the time, the issue with these devices, and this is something also I didn't really mention, but we really need to talk about it, is not getting yourself the ability to be distracted. In other words, push notifications, those have to be turned off. There's certain things where, society will learn. Of course, I'm into airplanes. So if I allowed it to happen, when there was a new airplane that I'm particularly interested that comes on the market, guess what? There's going to be a little airplane coming across my screen right in the middle of me seeing a patient or whatever with a little, sound that comes with it, so that I'll get distracted because the internet knows that I like airplanes. And is that going to be a good thing for me or a good thing for the patient or anything? No, absolutely not. We want those push notifications off. We want email notifications off. We want, in fact, I only do my emails at a set time, and I do them all at once. And some of my staff, I'm president of what's going to be a university coming up, and some people would say, boy, as a president, you need to be more available to your staff. Well, that staff knows how to find me if it's really urgent, and they know how to get me in alternative ways. But if it's via email, they need to know that I might have already answered my email today, and I'm not going to get to them until tomorrow, because we're going to knock them out all at one time and make this as efficient as possible and not be completely being divided in attention and all of those sorts of things. So it's the division of attention that we really want to be very particular on. And of course, all of these companies have learned how to catch our attention in order for their benefit and not for ours. So in regards to those apps, I probably have to refer you to Cami Martin, who actually does the lecture on this and actually decreases it all to them. But, there are some things like a calculator. There might be some things like your GPS map. You're probably not going to be distracted from that and being able to find locations. There's certain things in regards to the professional world in regards to certain apps of what their specialty is and being able to access some very good information at the right times, but with those push notifications turned off. It's going to be those type of things that are left on there. One of the most dangerous things is YouTube. To have free access to YouTube, because as soon as you get on a YouTube video, guess what? There's 20 others that crop up there that are enticing you to look at that. And pretty soon, even though you're thinking, hey, it's just a 3-minute video, I can do this, pretty soon 35 minutes are gone and you're kicking yourself. And that's why those things have to be eliminated. So if you get caught into something like that has to be gone. And so you've got to be able to have alternative ways. Well, I hope this has been helpful to the Hawaiian Central Church. And I certainly want to wish you all the best of health of body, mind, and soul, and that you put these principles into action. And I can tell you, you won't be disappointed by doing so. You will be enhanced in many ways, physically, mentally, and spiritually. I'll leave it to Pastor Sager to close things up.
All right, thank you, Dr. Nedley. I just want to ask, is Erica here? Eric, all right, I'd just like to invite her to come up, and I just want to say a special prayer of dedication for you, for Weimar. It's going to be Weimar University, and I'd like to ask the congregation to just go ahead and stand with us to show that we really are. We used to do this when people would come, we'd gather around you, and we haven't really done that for about 10 months now, but
I understand.
We would like to lift you up and the university as well, and pray for God's blessing as that moves forward. Let's go ahead and bow our heads for a word of prayer. Our gracious Father in heaven, I just want to pause and lift up to you Dr. Nedley and his wife Erica, their family and their extended faculty family there at Weimar. We pray as they make this transition from being Weimar Institute into Weimar University, that it would continue to be a place that lifts up the Scripture, a place that continues to glorify you in all that they do. And we know that you're going to walk with them, and we just ask for tremendous, tremendous blessings, that they will know that as they are faithful to you, you're going to show the world just how faithful you are to them. And so, Lord, we just ask for your power and your presence with them, and that they would continue to be a great blessing to everyone they come in contact with and beyond. And we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, thank you so much for being with us. All right, have a great rest of your Sabbath day. If you need to see this again, or if you missed this morning's presentation, you'll be able to go, sorry, Dr. Nedley, if you go to YouTube, you can search Honolulu SDA, and all of the videos will be up there. Probably sometime either later tonight or tomorrow, those videos will be there. God bless. Have a great Sabbath.